Good morning, everyone. Today is April 3rd, 2022, and we have the pleasure of having Terry Tibando on. He's going to be doing his book launch on a citizen's disclosure on UFOs and ETI, which is volume 1, I believe, of his book. Now, most people know Terry in the field of UFOs and extraterrestrial research as the CSETI Vancouver person. He takes out to people to see, to do sky watches. And he knows Dr. Greer, and he uses Dr. Greer's protocols for that. Terry is a lifelong experiencer, 69 years, and also it's generational in his family, starting the phenomenon with childhood encounters. So he's going to be talking about his wonderful book today, which is the 6th volume. And today we're going to be talking about volume 1. So hello, Terry, and welcome.
Hi, Mimi. Thanks for having me on, and a welcome to everybody that's attending this presentation. I hope it meets your expectations. Okay, so this is volume 1, which is a citizen's disclosure on UFOs and ETI, global evidence of the UFO and ETI presence. And this is the book that we're going to be talking about a little bit from, not all of it, because there's about 12 chapters in it, and I'm only picking out about 4 or 5 that I think are relevant and important. So we're going to discuss some of these topics that I feel are the ones you should need to know. So about this volume 1, and I hope everybody can read this. These textbooks are very comprehensive and definitive body of work, originally written as one massive encyclopedic tome, 3,636 pages, but now divided into a 6-volume textbook series. These reference manuals are of a university caliber with texts and photographs fully referenced with a color-coded by bibliography, and videography, meaning that you can go to the book, write out what you see, and go to those links, and you'll see more. So this is like a 10,000-page book if you go to these links. These volumes have hundreds of colored photographs, a large table of content, and an extensive index. These textbooks are unique, and frankly, there are no other books quite like these in the UFO and ETI literature. That being is that when you buy most books, you get a 6x9 type of pocket novel type of information with a few pictures. These have hundreds of pictures within them. And these books are available from Chapters, Indigo, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Hudson Books, Booktopia, Book World, and about 39,000 other bookstores and distributors. And you can buy some of these soft-covered editions of my book directly from me. There is a discounted price. And the only way to get hold of these is to go online. You cannot walk into the store and see them on the bookshelves. For whatever reason, they just simply don't want to carry a book of this type of size, and maybe it's the expense of ordering it, I don't know. But they are similar to a university text. Okay, a little bit about myself. That's the smiling face. I attended the University of Victoria, and I majored in astronomy, math, physics, and other sciences. I have 69 years of sightings in ET contact interactions, trained as an ambassador to the universe by Dr. Stephen Greer in 1996. I've had 29 years as the CSETI Vancouver coordinator, successfully establishing ETI contact and communication. I've had groups of people with me who also experienced the same thing. We hosted the first witness disclosure event in Canada back in September 2001. That was September 9th. That was 2 days before 9/11 at the Simon Fraser University with guest speakers Dr. Stephen Greer, Dr. Carol Rosen, and Dr. Alfred L. Weber, JD. I've authored the 6-volume textbook series under the title of A Citizen's Disclosure of UFOs and ETI. My other interests are UFO and ETI research, history, particularly medieval history, comparative religions. I've been interviewed on the Discovery Channel for Alien Week, appeared on BCTV for CSETI Vancouver. I've been interviewed by various Canadian UFO podcasts, radio stations from Vancouver, Calgary, Dearborn, Michigan, New York, and Tampa, Florida, and even in Japan. So the word has gotten around, and I'm hoping that the books sell. Okay, what's in volume 1? This gives you an idea of what's in volume 1. There's a historical perspective of UFOs and ETI from antiquity to modern times, ancient astronauts and ancient aliens, global cultural mythologies of ancient alien gods, religious facts and myths of the UFO and ETI phenomena, characteristics of unidentified flying objects, what determines flying objects to be UFOs, recognizing everyday IFOs, identified flying objects, makes for a better observer, the phenomenological reality of UFOs and ETI, global UFO sightings, a worldwide body of evidence, the psychology of UFOs, close encounters, categorizing the UFO phenomena, the extraterrestrial hypothesis versus other hypotheses, classification of extraterrestrial intelligence visiting the Earth, in search of life, experiential similarities and differences between extraterrestrial and paranormal realities, and then the holographic universe and the holographic paradigm. Okay, so the topics that I want to discuss today is ancient astronauts and ancient aliens, religious facts and myths of the UFO and ETI phenomena, close encounters categorizing the UFO phenomena, classification of extraterrestrial intelligence visiting the Earth. Now, these are my personal assessment of the UFO and ETI phenomena. As I was researching this book, I realized that there was more going on that even I initially knew about. First, the UFO and ETI database is seriously flawed and corrupted. And this has filtered down through the UFO community, and they don't seem to be aware of how to I don't think they're even aware that there's a flaw in it. We're going to discuss some of these flaws. The UFO community is far too quick in trusting officialdom, that is the military, aka UFOs and UAPs. Ancient alien theorists ignore historical evidence and instead spin speculative conjecture. Many religious paintings are misinterpreted as alien spacecraft, especially Christian artwork. Many biblical chapters and verses are misinterpreted as visiting UFOs piloted by ETI. And the so-called alien abduction of humans are in reality covert human-initiated abductions. I realize that some of these are going to perhaps make people feel uncomfortable, but it's one man's perspective. You don't have to accept it, or you can go out and research it for yourself. Okay, so this has been the main guiding quote that I have as I went through my research, and it says, "Know thou that every fixed star hath its planets, and every planet hath its creatures, whose number no man can compute." By what they mean by fixed star is a stable star. So if you know anything about astronomy, as a star comes into being and its planets form, it's known as a protostar with protoplanets. That is not a fixed star. That is yet a star that needs to become stable. So when we look at a star that's been around for at least 1 billion years or more, its planets have also formed and solidified into what we know as planets, particularly if we use our own solar system as an example of that. So, who wants to take a ride? So the first thing we're going to look at is petroglyphs cave paintings of UFOs and ETI. And we're going to look at Australia and some of the petroglyphs there. You may have seen some of this stuff before. These are known as Wajinas. They date back 3000 BC. Some believe that they go back at least 25,000 years or more. Some of the oldest paintings, cave paintings in the world. In France, we have cave paintings, particularly in one cave known as Pec Merle. It shows some very interesting things. When Neanderthals or primitive man recorded or seen different animals, he put them onto cave walls. When he did that, he tried to draw with some reasonable accuracy. What we also notice is that there are some strange little things that look like discs or blobs or something to that effect. And when we examine them with today's understanding, we see that they resemble what we classify as UFOs. There's even this strange little fish-like object that seems to have a curl at the end and sort of some radiating points from it. If you were to look at the hieroglyphics in Abydos, you see the same fish-like object. We don't know what that is. It could be a UFO, it could be something else, but it's interesting to see that there are similarities, yet they're thousands of miles apart, and one is more primitive than the other. India. Again, more cave paintings, beings that appear to have 4 fingers and a large head. On the right, there is another being that shows what appears to be some form of spacesuit. There's a craft that's radiating energy and looks like it's dispersing some objects from it. And what also appears above in the middle top is what could be a portal of some kind. We don't really know, but speculation, which is what a lot of this is based on, seem to indicate that it is somewhat familiar to us. So we're giving it familiar terms to something that is very ancient. Italy and Africa. Here we see more of the various cave paintings in the top left. There's the one from Italy. It appears to show, it's the same picture, but it's in color in black and white. And it shows 2 beings which seem to have helmets that radiate some kind of energy from it. They could be holding perhaps a shield and a stick, or it could be that these are some technological device. Again, it's open to speculation. Down below are other paintings from the Tassili Mountains in the Siberian desert in Algeria. And again, on the right, there's other strange pictures of beings that have look like horns and bumps on their arm. Below, there's others that show animals, that one in particular with a question mark beside it seems to show something that looks like a dinosaur. We don't know. and a small being that looks like what we would refer to as a gray, and perhaps even a spaceship of some kind. Canada and Japan. Now, if you go to Christina Lake and go out in the lake and go along the shoreline, you will come across a petroglyph that's in red. And what it appears to be is a saucer-shaped craft with little beings or beings of some kind. And the craft is either hovering or it's on some kind of stilts on the ground. And this is still visible today. It's done by the Coast Salish native people. In the picture on the upper right, we see what is described as a solar being. This is from Peterborough, Ontario. It's a petroglyph in southern Ontario, and it is comparable to other paintings such as the one in North Africa in Tathili. And below is one from Japan that shows what can only be a rocket. It has the fins and the nozzle and what looks like flames or something coming out of the rear end. Very unusual. Peru, USA, and Mexico. These are only just some of the samples that are found in the southwestern United States and in Peru. So in Peru, we see these particular petroglyphs, again, beings wearing some kind of a helmet with energy or light being emitted from it. Below is from the southwestern United States, what appears to be two craft that may have landed, or maybe they were damaged, we don't know, but they were recorded. If you go to the Sago Canyon in Utah, you can see a lot of petroglyphs of various creatures, some of them humanoid, some of them human, and others not so human, with antennae, and a lot of these appear to have no feet. So this may also represent something more spiritual as opposed to something that is physically real, like, you know, if we were looking at an animal or a person or an object of some kind. But whatever they recorded, it was important enough for them to do so. In the bottom right is another cave painting of sorts, again with something very bright and luminous in the sky. It has circles within it, and there are beings on the surface. Are they, is this the sun? Is this a UFO? Are these ETs? Your guess is as good as mine. UFOs, ETI relics, and artifacts from the past. Ancient Mayan alien artifacts. Now, these are some of very intriguing artifacts that were found, and they seem to show beings with long elongated eyes, particularly in this section mid-right. But there's also what looks like craft flying around, disc shape, and with a being inside of one. This could be a close-up of this craft here that has this particular being. They seem to be what would be referred to as an ancient astronaut. But again, you can draw similarities. Does that mean that this is what was being recorded? It's hard to tell. The problem with some of this stuff is that it still looks like it's fairly fresh and new. And if anybody's done archaeology or seen archaeological photographs, you realize that what they find is usually weather-worn, roughed. There are bits and pieces missing from it, which is natural erosion or weathering of these artifacts or relics. So we have to be very careful when we see things like this and not necessarily jump to conclusions. It could be that this is an artistic impression done by the artist. Yeah, okay. Okay, the Abydos helicopter hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt. This is probably one of the real mysteries that has yet to be really resolved. Above one of the temples is a lintel that shows what appears to be modern day technology. And there's been debate as to that this was a Plymouth set, which means that they did some modification to some of the hieroglyphs and altered them to look more representational of things that we are familiar with in this current age. The thing is that when we compare them, we can see similarities between a helicopter, a tank, a jet, a glider. There's an insect, there's this fish type object. And this has created controversy amongst archaeologists. What are they looking at? And can it be that something from our present has gone back into the past? Or were these things that were there from other cultures or perhaps from an alien influence? One person in particular from Vancouver did some work on the hieroglyphics using Pythagoras' theorem, and he overlaid the various forms. And what he found was they were there originally, that there is no plastic cast material laid over these. This is original material that was formed or created at the time. And so we're left wondering, what is it that we're looking at? Obviously, it looks current. When we look at Sakura, there is what is referred to as a bird, but with wings and a horizontal, a vertical tail. And this has aerodynamic qualities. They said that it was once used on the top of the sailing mast to show direction of where the wind was coming. But anybody who sails knows where the wind is coming because it will affect the sails of a ship. So we don't really know what this is. It's obviously aerodynamic. The Torpor Kylie space shuttle and Mayan gold airplanes. And this is, again, one of these unusual out-of-place artifacts, UPARTs, that was found in, I believe it's Torpor Kylie is in Croatia, and it appears to be a rocket or a shuttle of some kind. It has nozzles on the back. The head is missing, but I have seen a picture where the head is present. So whether this was a feature that was added on later, I have no idea, but this gives an idea of what it may have looked like. On the right, we have a lot of these Mayan or Incan gold figurines that at first glance appear to be butterflies, birds, fish, and even some animals. But again, they have aerodynamic qualities. And when we start to look at some of them, particularly in the lower left here, we can see some of the animal shapes, the zoomorphic representations, but there is this aerodynamic quality to it. And in fact, a couple of gentlemen by the name of Airboom and Belting actually built a craft that had a jet in it, and they built it on one of the figurines, and essentially it flew. And it flew without a lot of remote control of the rudders and airfoils on it. And they were astonished, and they realized that these gold figurines had the capability of flight. So again, how did the Incans and Mayans know about flight? How did they come to that understanding? Ancient astronauts and ancient aliens. Okay, we're going to look at some of the artifacts from Ukraine, Japan, and Aztec ancient astronauts and alien relics. You may have seen some of this stuff before. This is a metal figurine. It appears to have some form of helmet, and this was found in Ukraine. These other ones down below are from Central America and Aztec. The central ones are from Japan. They are known as the Dugu figurines. Now, if you look at the eyes, you'll notice that they have slits in them. They're very large, they have slits. And it's been interpreted that this may be a representation of possible alien contact. But I have recently found that in the Northern Hemisphere, the Laplanders and our own Inuit people use masks that have the light goggles with slits in them, which are used to protect their eyes when they're going out against the wind or in snowy climates. So this may actually be a protective device or goggles that the Japanese people used to wear when they went out during the winter, or perhaps it was out in a sandy area. They needed to protect their eyes. However, when you start to look at other figurines, and some of them here show 3 toes and probably, I guess, similar fingers with a helmet, and compare it to the astronaut beside it, we realize that there is something very familiar and similar about it. So we don't really know what we're looking at. We can only conjecture, and maybe our conjectures are true, but we need more research into it. The Olmec, Mayan, and Inca ancient astronauts. Again, we're going to see a lot more of these. These are definitely unusual. We know that the Central American people used to wear a lot of ornamentation, garbs, feathers, things that represented snakes, represented panthers, all kinds of different animals. And so the thing about this is, are they depicting something found in nature, or are they depicting something that may not have been a part of this earth? We can draw comparisons between the statuettes and with astronauts flying in space, and there's obviously similarity there. So again, a lot of this is left to the reader to decide. And that's how I wrote the book. A lot of it is open to the reader to decide for themselves. Sumerian and Mesopotamia, Ubaid lizard people. These are really unusual statuettes. They seem to depict people who have lizard-like features. And they're shown both as male and female, and one the female seems to be nursing a young child. So again, what are we looking at here? Is this again something that is native to our Earth, or is it beings that came to our planet in the ancient past? I mean, these are very non-human looking beings for certainty. But again, we see this mass with the sort of large eyes with slits in them. Does that mean that this is a representation of somebody from the Orient? Or is this a facial mask for protection? Or is that what they're seeing as a living being? Is this what they look like? This is probably one of the only places on the planet where you're going to find some very unusual statuettes that don't seem to conform to any culture. The Vinca culture heads the statuettes. One of the things that we find here is, again, these heads with the large eyes and statuettes, again, depicting either a mother and child. Is this artistic licensing that was done by the creator, or were they actually depicting what they saw? The problem here is that when we look at these things, one cannot help but draw conclusions, or at least initial assessments, that these things, based on our current knowledge and understanding, may not be from this planet, that they seem to represent something else. So it opens up a wide door for investigation. Okay, elongated heads and the Paraka skulls of Peru. This is probably one of my favorite topics here. When we look at the right, we see the elongated heads of the Paraka skulls that have been found in Mexico and Peru. But when we look at cultures around the world, this is not an uncommon feature. Here we see Oriental features, Caucasian or European features, Central American or North American, indigenous people, African people, all with elongated heads. And bonding and planking was a common practice back hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. People have speculated, well, why did they do that? We don't really know, but it seemed to have been a style. This person in the middle is an actor who is probably well known in a lot of horror type films because of his unusual facial features. Here is a head bust of perhaps Queen Nefertiti, an actual skull that was dug up. Again, you know, we have to use what we call Occam's razor, that if there's a natural explanation that gives an answer to these anomalies that we're investigating, then chances are that's the right deduction of what these things are. If we're using, say, Arthur Conan Doyle's power of deduction, then whatever is left over from investigation, no matter how improbable, is probably the right answer. But what we're finding is that Occam's razor in this case seems to apply much better than what we think is extraterrestrial. I also will point out, how can something not of this earth have such similar features in bone structure, even though the head is elongated and may only have 2 plates to the cranium as opposed to 3 or 4 plates? The fact is that when you do a DNA study of this, there may be something unusual. And that's not to say that this is another form of human being, but we have to look at it with a rational eye, not jump to conclusions. Okay, UFOs in religious and medieval art. This is one of those other flaws that shows up and everybody jumps on it and says, yes, the Bible describes UFOs and here's paintings to support that belief. But when you examine these pictures very carefully, and they show up in all these paintings, you see what appears to be something that looks like a flying object with a person in it, and another one with a person in it. But in fact, this is the sun, and this is the moon, and it shows up in other paintings and reliefs as the sun and the moon. In fact, there is a section called as the sun and the moon as my witness, meaning that they were acknowledging the crucifixion of Christ at the time. And these types of paintings were done in what is called a Byzantine period between the 1400s and the 1500s, in between that time period. And this was the only thing that the Roman Catholic Church would allow artists to do. They wouldn't allow them to paint other sceneries or people or events until they entered into the 1500s. You see the same thing here, well-known paintings. This has been the touchstone for a lot of ufologists saying, yes, there were UFOs in the time of Christ or the biblical times. But in fact, again, when you do the research and you see this individual in the painting off in the distance with a dog looking up, one could say, yes, initially that looks like he's looking at a flying saucer or an unidentified flying object. But when you blow it up, you start to realize there's something else in this picture that is familiar. Now, this isn't the best representation, but there are others. Here we see a similar situation of a person looking up into what looks like a UFO, but there's an angel in it. And so now we're going to say, well, wait a minute, maybe aliens are also angels, or angels are aliens. It shows up in the Crivelli painting of 1486, where another person is looking up at something in the sky. There's doves flying around. There's what appears to be people of a religious person talking to an individual who has wings, perhaps what is termed as an angel. And we see the Virgin Mary, what appears to be a dove, and something coming down from this object towards Mary. Is this a UFO zapping Mary and somehow in creating her pregnancy? We don't know until we start to examine the photograph. And here's what we see. When we blow it up, this white object is the dove, which is symbolic of the Spirit of God. When we look at this UFO, we see that it has little cherubims and angels in it. This is known as the Annunciation, where the concourse on high is represented with angels, and they are giving acknowledgement to the sacredness of the Virgin Mary, the Madonna at the time, and that the individuals looking up are acknowledging the Annunciation and the concourse on high, paying homage to her. And we see this in a lot of paintings. Another thing that we find in some of these paintings is what looks like a Sputnik. And once again, when we look at this carefully, we'll see this sun and moon, which is being represented in other paintings. Here is represented in a globe, which is considered the globe of creation. And on either side of it is Christ and God and the dove. All of these, again, are symbologies or iconographies of a Christian concept. And it shows up in many, many different paintings. And so we can't say that individual artists of the time were aware of the Sputnik that may have come to Earth, when maybe what we're really looking at is something that is more symbolic in nature and needs to be understood with a spiritual nature or a religious nature, as opposed to something that is literal. Again, we have many, many different paintings showing the same thing. And we see that as it evolves down, that this globe becomes like a globe for royalty. We see that here Christ and God wear crowns, emphasizing their authority and power. And the globe represents that. And in each of those paintings, we see the dove, which is representative of the Spirit of God. UFOs recorded in medieval artwork. Now, there are actual events that did take place where UFOs did show up that cannot be explained as religious in nature. And they go back as far as the times of the Romans. There's even accounts where Alexander the Great, when he went off into India to attack India, was besieged with flying shields that gave his men and their steeds and army a problem, because they didn't know what they were, and they were flying and swooping low. Perhaps it was an indication to them that these devices didn't want them to go to war. But As such, we see it also in the Saxon invasion of the Cyberg castle. There appears to be something flying in the sky at the time during that invasion. There are many different scenes from different times. One that depicts what looks like a rocket. Another is when they were sailing out onto the North Sea during the 1660s, and glowing orbs and objects appeared. They appeared also in Germany and in France, where the saucers were literally coming across the sea, and it looks like they're even firing upon them. So they didn't know what they were doing or what these were at that time. In India, we have the Vimanas and the Pushpakas and the other different devices that were used or created at the time. And India is one of those cultures that is really steeped in a lot of mysticism, but a lot of ancient history. And there appears to be objects that represent what looks like flying hats or flying saucers. But in a lot of the descriptions of the Vimanas and the Pushpakas is that they were flying temples with wings. Wings, were they birds or were they constructions? We don't know. In this picture below in the center, we see a picture of Krishna and his wife and Arjuna, who was one of his devoted disciples, who are disembarking from a Pushpaka Vimana, but it is in the shape of a temple with a large swan. Now, the thing is this something that was real, or is this symbolic of something else? We know that Krishna was a divine being, so therefore we have to look at this in light of that background and not jump to the conclusion that it is something extraterrestrial or that they had knowledge of extraterrestrial technology. Even though when we look at a lot of these Vimanas and yantras and Pushpakas, we find that there are things here that look very mechanically contrived, and there is descriptions that go into how these things were built. In the Far East, we find that China and Japan also had their sightings of very strange craft, including one of the Yusutobuni, where a craft came down near an ocean, and there was a being that came out with a special box that they believed that she used to either translate language or something else, but this was a description of it at that time. Again, some of the Vimanas that were used in hunting by some of the Far Eastern people, perhaps the Chinese. In Tibet, again, there's tapestries that show things in the background that look like flying saucers. So again, are we looking at something that is extraterrestrial visiting the planet? Quite possibly. And I will not dispute that with anybody. I think that's a real strong possibility. Religious facts and myths about UFOs and ETI phenomena. Here we're going to get into a little bit of controversy, and I don't mean to upset anybody by this, but it's what I've been able to find out myself. I had to overturn a lot of my own thinking when I came across this, because I believed in this at one point, and now my belief is a lot different. Do religions acknowledge life in the universe? Here's what I found, and this is what I've explored. What do the following religions, holy books, have to say about UFOs and ETI? I've broken this down into various beliefs or faiths. Exo Theology is what isn't written is explained in modern terms. Judaism derives its knowledge from the Pentateuch, which is the Torah or the Old Testament. And one of the things we'll look at is the book of Ezekiel. Zoroastrian belief, their book, holy book, is the Zend-Avesta. Christianity is the gospel, referred to as the New Testament. Islam, their book is the Quran. Hinduism, they have a lot of books. Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, Ramayana. The Buddhism has the Buddha Vakana. The Baha'i faith has hundreds of books on the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and the writings of the Universal House of Justice. And we'll get into all of that. So Exo Theology is essentially, Exo Theology attempts to apply theological conjectural beliefs and thinking of the possibility that extraterrestrials are sentient and may be endowed with a soul as a hypothetical what if. So if they can't find it, say, within their own context of their own holy books, then they'll speculate based on current thinking and knowledge and saying, well, what if this were real? Then we can extrapolate. Judaism and the possibility of extraterrestrial life. When we look at words such as watcher, and looking up what is a watcher is an angel who observes something attentively or regularly. Biblically, an angel is a spiritual being who acts as an attendant, an agent, or a messenger of God, conventionally represented in human form, with sometimes with wings and a long robe. Rationally, it is a person of exemplary conduct and virtue. So you could use any of these terms in to fit into the verse or chapter that you're reading, and it will make more sense to you. If you are saying, well, an extraterrestrial could be a watcher, yes, I will certainly acknowledge that as a possibility. But I think, again, we have to look at human terms to describe human events and not look necessarily outside of our planet for the answer. It's using Occam's razor. And what cannot be explained by Occam's razor, then we look at the power of deduction. So in the book of Ezekiel, we find probably one of the main books that, again, a lot of UFO researchers will latch onto, probably because in North America and Europe, the basic faith is Christianity and Judaism. But when you start to delve into it, again, carefully reading what's there and not putting in anything into it that isn't there, we say in the first verse, we see that the heavens were open and I saw visions of God. That's the key word, visions of God, not visions of ET, visions of UFO, but visions of God. The word of the Lord came expressly to Ezekiel, and the hand of the Lord was upon him there. He was taken as a Hebrew priest across the rivers of Chaldea into that territory, probably by what we would refer to as the Arab people or the Zoroastrians of that time. And the Zoroastrians was a major religion at that time. We'll get into that. It says in verse 5 that there came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings. And as the likeness of their faces, they had the face of a man, the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and they also had the face of an eagle. Now I beheld these living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures. And the appearance of the wheels and their works, and their appearance was, and their works was as a wheel within the middle of a wheel. and there was rings, and their wings, and their rings were full of eyes around about the 4 of them. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went with them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day, and was the appearance of the brightness all around it, and the appearance of the lightness of the glory of the Lord. Now, that last few words is very key, because he's describing this as like the glory of the Lord. He's referring to this in religious, spiritual terms, not in literal terms as objects descending as such, because this is a vision, and he makes that very clear. So what do we find when we examine this whole chapter? We find that somebody has done an artistic impression of this. Wheels within wheels with eyes, creatures with 4 sets of wings, and these creatures had the head of a lion, of a man, of an ox, and of an eagle. Now, when you compare this to the zodiac, you find the same thing. Lion, an ox or Taurus, an eagle, and Aquarius, or the human. The eagle is also represented by the serpent, or by Scorpio, the scorpion. So what we're really being told here is a description of the zodiac, and that these represent the 4 cardinal points on the zodiac. And when we compare that with recent understanding of astronomy and astrology, we can start to make more sense of it. Here we have the constellations of Leo and Virgo and Pisces and all the rest of around on a plane, and the Earth is in the middle on what is called the celestial equator, and it is tilted at 23.5 degrees, and its precessional period where it goes through each of these constellations is approximately 12,882 years, and this is known as the celestial sphere on the plane of the ecliptic. If anybody's watched Sherlock Holmes, he had difficulty in understanding this, but this is essentially what is being described. Now, when you understand all of that, you realize that Ezekiel's vision is a prophecy, and he's describing the prophecy of the coming of a great prophet at some future time, and that this zodiac gives reference to the approximate time when this would all take place. So we'll find out that this prophecy has been fulfilled, and that this throne that descends from heaven represents actually a new revelation and the law of God descending upon the earthly plane. The Zoroastrian faith and life in the universe. Again, when I asked one simple question of all religions, is there anything in your religion that speaks concisely to life in the universe? And by that, I mean in the understanding that there is life on other planets. What we find is that this symbol is used repeatedly by ancient alien theorists to depict that Zoroaster was an alien, that he had wings and probably a tail, and he flew in a craft that represented flight. No, this is actually a symbolism or an iconography of what Zoroaster represented, which was divine revelation, prophethood. He was a messenger from God, and this set of wings indicated more of his heavenly virtues, his spiritual virtues, not something literal. We don't see people flying around even today with wings. So to imagine that in the past there were individuals flying around with wings really does stretch one's imagination, even to the point of how could that have been? Zoroaster was the messenger of light, and he wasn't riding in a spaceship as portrayed by the ancient astronaut theorists. Christianity, the gospel, and the strange absence of extraterrestrial life. When we delve into the gospel, what we find is it's really about the disciples and about the life, the birth, life, and death of Christ. And so we're going to look at some of these ETI perspectives. And what we find is that Christianity, for the most part, because there is nothing in it that talks about extraterrestrial life or life on other planets or in the universe, uses then Exo Theology to describe the possibility of life in the universe. It says, fortunately, not all Christendom views extraterrestrial intelligence in the way that there is no life. In fact, sees them as part of God's children, and Catholicism stands ready to embrace them in their church. Even the Pope would baptize them in the name of Christ. And I've read that a number of times from what Christians believe. The contemporary societies, you may soon look to the aliens to be saviors of humankind. And this comes from the Vatican astronomer and planetary scientist of the Vatican Observatory, Father Guy Consolmagno. I hope I pronounced that right. Christians will immediately need to renounce, let me read that again. Christians will not immediately need to renounce their faith in God, simply on the basis of the reception of this new, unexpected information of religious character from extraterrestrial civilizations. However, once the religious content originating from outside the earth has been verified, they will have to conduct a rereading of the gospel, inclusive of the new data. And again, this comes from Vatican astronomers. Essentially, Christianity uses exo-theological points of view, as the gospel is mainly about the life of Christ and has nothing to do, or has nothing in it about the life in the universe. I've read the Bible right from the Old Testament right through to the New Testament because I'm interested in comparative religions. I had to know what was in there, and I reread certain sections over and over again until I thought to myself that I fully understood what was being taught or being written. Islam and life in the universe. What we find is that the Quran is set up and written out very much like the Bible, chapter and verse. And in Surah 42, in verse 29 of the Quran, we are told, among God's signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the living creatures that he has scattered through them. And he has power to gather them together when he wills. In other words, Islam is saying specifically there is life on the other planets. This is probably the first religion that's come out categorically and stated this for a certainty, that there is life on other planets. According to the Quran, the universe is populated with Earth-type planets and with the existence of three entirely separate, distinct species of intelligent beings in the universe, those being angels, men, and jinns. The first category is that of angels or messengers. The second are men with planetary physical bodies assembled from the mineral and chemical elements of the periodic table. The third category is jinn beings created before man existed, who are referred to collectively as al-jinn. That means to hide or to conceal. The bodies of angels are of light. The bodies of al-jinns consist of essential fire, essential flame, or smokeless fire or smokeless flame. This is reminiscent of the angels and devils, demons found in the Bible, which has more to do with spiritual concepts to describe spiritual condition or event. Islam, therefore, acknowledges that there is life throughout the universe. Hinduism, the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Vimanas and the Yantras. The Vimanas and Yantras are vehicles. Here we see at least two of them. This is just from the other slide. What is interesting is that when you read the descriptions of how these objects were made, these devices, they're made from metal, stone, plants, trees. And when you ask somebody who forges metals, why would they use plants to be a part of their construction? You realize that there's something seriously flawed or misunderstood here, and that is when you put anything into a smelting forge, it will reduce it down into a liquid form. But when it's a plant, and some of these plants are actual herbs, you find that you're going to lose that. It will disintegrate into carbon. And if they wanted to make carbon, they wouldn't have used plants. They would have used a coal or coke to have done that. So there's something that is in the interpretation of these writings that perhaps needs to be investigated further, because though these devices definitely show a shape and form, they were designed or written down or drawn hundreds of years after the time of the prophet. So that means that we have no understanding of what was really described or seen or utilized at that time. When you examine most religions talk about spiritual matters. They very rarely talk about physical or historical matters unless it relates to a spiritual concept. Hinduism does acknowledge, however, infinite worlds. And Hinduism in its holy text seems to indicate that not only is there a vast universe, but physically and spiritually, that it is populated with infinite universes filled with infinite suns and worlds. This may imply that that life exists on these worlds. It doesn't come out and say that, but it implies it. The often quoted Sanskrit verse from the Bhagavad Gita attributed to Lord Krishna, where he is trying to persuade Prince Arjuna that he should do his duty and to impress upon him, takes on the multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," indicating that the earth is just one of many worlds. So that's an acknowledgement that there are many, many infinite worlds. According to Hindu philosophy, the universe and the multiverse never came to be at some point, a particular point, but has always been, is always will be, but is perpetually in flux. Space and time are cylindrical in nature. An infinite universe with birth and death cycles. The concept of a multiverse or multiverses is mentioned many times in the Hindu Puranic literature, such as the Bhagavad Gita Purana, which dates around 500 to 1000 Christian of the Christian era. Hinduism states that the universe, multiverse, is so vast and infinite that it is beyond all human comprehension. It is of extreme age, 150 billion years old, as opposed to the current scientific accepted knowledge that the universe is perhaps 15 to 20 billion years old. The age of the universe also runs in a cycle of birth and death, where ages or yugas indicate a particular time period, such as gold, silver, bronze, iron, similar to that of Judaism, Christianity, and Islamic beliefs. However, there are no holy writings indicating specifically other life forms in the universe. Here we see a cycle, the Vedic calendar, where ages or yugas are seen. And as I say, if you delve into some of the Old and New Testament, you can see these ages that correspond to various civilizations at the time. So there is a similarity even globally back then, but most people were not aware of. Buddhism, the Buddha Vakana, and life in the universe. Again, here, the Buddha Vakana, or Buddhism, says that there are infinite worlds and that they are incalculable. Buddha proclaimed that there are numerous other planets, each with their own life forms. He said that these planets are great distances apart from each other. The Buddha said that there are thousands of suns, thousands of moons, thousands of continents. The Buddha described a 10,000 world system, which was to say that there are literally innumerable amount of solar systems. The Buddha stated that the infinite world spheres are incalculable. That's from the Buddha Vakana. Buddhism is a sectarian religion like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Depending on which Buddhist holy book you read and accept, there is either life throughout the universe or there is no life, but only what is found here on Earth. So that boils down to a personal belief on which holy book you're reading, because many of the Buddhist books were written centuries after the lifetime of Buddha. It becomes a personal belief or choice, whether a choice either way to whether life exists in the universe. It's a personal choice or belief. In all my studies, what I have found is that the Baha'i faith is probably the only religion that comes out and has it as a part of its writings that acknowledges the presence of extraterrestrial life in the universe. It's emphatic. What we're looking at here is writings from Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah is the prophet and founder of the Baha'i faith, and it is a universal manifestation of God. He has stated, "Know thou that every fixed star hath its own planets, and every planet its creatures, whose number no man can compute. Verily, I say, the creation of God embraceth worlds besides this world, creatures apart from these creatures. In each of these worlds he hath ordained things which none can search except himself, the all-searching, the all-wise." You have to understand that when we're looking at religion and we're looking at all these great divine prophets from the time of Krishna and Christ and Buddha and Moses, all up to the time of Baha'u'llah, they're all from God. They're really the one and the same spirit. And they are the spokespeople on this earth, and they give the word of God to humanity. If we want to know about God, we have to listen to the prophets. That's the only way we're going to figure this out. And that means that not anybody can come along and claim to be a prophet, because usually prophets will sacrifice their lives in order to get the message out to the people. We have utterances from Abdu'l-Baha. Abdu'l-Baha is the son of Baha'u'llah, who was known as the Master. And he stated, "The earth has its inhabitants, the water, the air, and the air contain many living beings and all the elements of their nature, spirits. Then how is it possible to conceive these stupendous stellar bodies are not inhabited? Verily, they are people, but let it be known that the dwellers accord with the elements of their respective spheres. The living beings do not have states of consciousness," and that's important, "like those who live on the surface of this globe. The power of adaptation and environment molds their bodies and states of consciousness, just as our bodies and minds are suited to this planet." This is common sense. They have discovered that there is a great quantity of radium in the sun. The same element is found on Earth, but in much smaller degrees. Beings who inhabit these distant luminous bodies are attuned to the elements that have gone into the composition of their respective spheres. This is one that, verse that I had to really wrap my head around, because what they're saying is that there is life on stars, and no scientist to date has come out and said that, but it is up to them to discover that. And if they do discover it, they may not even recognize what that life is, because it's beyond their comprehension. Suffice it to say that when you look at radium, radium has bacteria and fungi that can live off the radiation. So what Abdu'l-Baha is saying is that because we have radium here and there's an abundance of radium in the sun, therefore the sun may have life. And this will be something that we'll need to explore. Then there are the letters from written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi. Shoghi Effendi is the grandson of Abdu'l-Baha and was known as the guardian of the Baha'i faith, who often wrote replies to believers' questions. As to your question, whether the power of Baha'u'llah extends over our solar system and its higher worlds, while the revelation of Baha'u'llah, it should be noted, is primarily for this planet, yet the spirit animating it is all-embracing, and its scope cannot be restricted or defined. Regarding your question, there is no record in history or in the teachings of a prophet similar in station to Baha'u'llah having lived 500,000 years ago. There will, however, be one similar to him in greatness after the lapse of 500,000 years. So if people are worried about whether life is going to continue on this planet, Baha'u'llah and the Baha'i writings assure us humanity will be around for at least the next 500,000 years in time to perceive another great universal manifestation. So humanity isn't dying out anytime soon. There will, however, be one similar to him after the expiration of 1,000 years, but we cannot say definitively or definitely that his revelation will be interplanetary in scope. We can only say that such a thing may be possible. What Baha'u'llah means in his appearance in other worlds, he has not defined, as we could not visualize them in our present state. Hence, we are indefinite and we cannot say whether he meant other planets or not. Abdu'l-Baha stated that there are other worlds than ours which are inhabited by beings capable of knowing God. And I think that's the important thing, that when people say ETs created us, well then who created the ETs? And I say to them, it is the greatest creator, ET creator, and that is the divine creator, who is the supreme extraterrestrial intelligence. And I am giving that a definition only because my words cannot really describe what God is. No one, not even Baha'is, know what God is, but we know it is a loving essence, a loving being, a loving force, and that it's all pervasive throughout the universe. It isn't just on this planet. And then we got letters from the Universal House of Justice, and the Universal House of Justice is a supreme governing spiritual body of the Baha'is of the world. Regarding the passage on 163 of the gleanings, and the creatures which Baha'u'llah states to be found in every planet cannot be considered to be necessarily similar or different from human beings on this earth. Baha'u'llah does not specifically state whether such creatures are like or unlike us. He simply refers to the fact that there are creatures in every planet. It remains for science to discover one day the exact nature of these creatures. And this is interesting, and I'll get into this a bit more. Being aware of these teachings, Baha'is cannot regard contacts between God's creatures on the various planets as an impossibility. But how or when it might happen, or whether it has yet happened, are nowhere stated in the teachings. Again, Baha'u'llah is writing about spiritual matters, not about physical matters. As you are rightly as you rightly state, Baha'u'llah affirms that every fixed star has its planets and every planet its creatures. The House of Justice states, however, that it has not discovered anything in the Baha'i writings which would indicate the degree of progress such creatures may have attained. Obviously, as creatures of Earth have managed to construct space probes and sent them out into outer space, it can be believed that creatures on other planets may have succeeded in doing likewise. Again, this should be, for most people, common sense, but it's not always that. Profound knowledge from the pen of Baha'u'llah. And this is some of the things that Baha'u'llah says. These remarkable writings were first written in the mid-1850s. The construction of railroads from the earth to the heavens, or means of transportation with the rapidity of rising lightning from the globe of the earth to the globe of the sun. Split the atom's heart, and lo, thou wilt find a sun. So what he's talking about is atomic power. When he's talking about railroads, he's not talking about literal railroads as we understand them with trains on them, but some form of transportation that is very fast, perhaps as fast as the speed of light. O son of man, wert thou to speed through the immensity of space and traverse the expanse of heaven, yet thou would find no rest save in submission to our command and humbleness before our face. In other words, he's saying God is everywhere. The earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. The men have been created to carry forward an ever advancing civilization. These are just some of the little snippets of Baha'u'llah's wisdom. Okay, so we're going to move on here and into extraterrestrial intelligence. And we're going to look at the classifications of UFOs and unidentified flying objects. Here we've got a number of charts that indicate how the military see UFOs, and they see most things that fly as as weather balloons, or weather balloons being swamp gas. In other words, they're not about to come out and admit that UFOs are extraterrestrial nature, but in fact, that's probably what they are. Jacques Vallée came out with a classification system based on anomalies and flybys, maneuvers, and close encounters. And these particular sightings had just a visual sighting or a physical effect. There were living entities that were by these craft or not. There was some reality transformation aspects that took place, or lasting injury from these objects. Is definitive, or at least as comprehensive as that may be, this doesn't seem to have taken hold in the UFO community. Ted Blocha came up with his own classification listing events from A to B to C right up to F. And they all have similar categories. Bob Bredberg, and I found this when I was searching this topic, came up with 12 classifications of encounters, from visual, craft identification, craft description, occupant identification, ETLF description, alien visitation, etc., right down to civilization exchange of information. J. Allen Hynek had the best UFO classification, and that was the close encounters of the first kind, the second, and the third kind, which I think most of us already understand. Jacques Vallée added to that, which was close encounters of the fourth kind, which he referred to as perhaps as an abduction, or at least where people saw an extraterrestrial being. Dr. Greer took it again one step further and came out with the close encounters of the fifth kind, which is human-initiated contact, not ET initiated, but human initiated. In other words, we wanted to go out and encounter ET beings and try to make contact with them and communicate with them. I looked at this further and I came up with two more. And people said, well, how can you possibly do this? Well, it's based on actual events and here's what they are. Close encounters of the sixth kind and close encounters of the seventh kind. And basically, close encounters of the sixth kind, you have to be an astronaut or a cosmonaut or a tachonaut in order to experience that, because you either have to leave the Earth and you have to encounter these in space or on another planetary body such as the moon. Close encounter, and so there's a unique group of people who've experienced that, and the majority of us will never experience that probably in our lifetime, but astronauts, etc., have experienced it. Close encounters of the seventh kind, anybody can do, and it's from the fact of you are meditating, you remote view, you see an ET spacecraft or being, you guide them to your planet, which all sounds like close encounters of the fifth kind, which it is, but here's the difference. If your remote viewing is about a future event and it is confirmed by more than one other person, and that event unfolds, then that is considered a close encounters of the seventh kind, because you were given information, whether visual or mental telepathy or some other form, and that event unfolded. I've had such an event, and so have others. So I know that that's a real classification. So both of those, sixth and seventh close encounters, are real, and it can be provable. Here we have various charts showing some of the types of flying objects that are seeing. Again, the general public will probably, in their own mind and understanding, recognize that UFOs are extraterrestrial spacecraft or craft that have an interdimensional capability. And they take on various shapes and forms. So whatever you can imagine, there's probably an object that will have that shape or form. I've had one person tell me where I live that her child was coming home from school and saw a UFO that looked like the shape of a barbell or a dumbbell, a rod in the middle and two round objects on the end. And it watched and followed her part way home and then took off. So, you know, again, these shapes can be anything you can imagine, and most likely you will probably have seen at some point. Again, we got similar things of UFO charts. These are a little more colorful. These are standard shapes that we've seen. There are places where some of the stuff is being recorded, such as Roswell or Mount Rainier or the Mojave Desert, or one from Vancouver Island back in, looks like 1981. And we have a map of the US. This doesn't do it justice, but if you were to pull up maps of the US in particular, you would see that there are dots literally everywhere across the United States. And you can graph this in different ways by the shapes of the craft and what have you. If you go to MUFON, MUFON has descriptions and places where people are often seeing different types of craft. Extraterrestrial Intelligence and ETI. This is really what we're getting at here. ET classification charts and graphs, drawings and digital images of ETI, photos of real extraterrestrial intelligence, my personal remote view of extraterrestrial intelligences. Here we have graphs and charts of different forms of extraterrestrials that people have seen at one time or another. Most of them are humanoid in shape, which begs the question, is there a grand design or template in which the divine creator has created intelligence, or did the divine creator just let his imagination go wild and create whatever he wanted? And then it seems to be that that's the case, because there are animalian type of ETs or robotics, exotics. They appear as apparitional, physical, fleshy, metallic, avian, insect, amphibian, reptilian, hairy, non-classic, giants, short grayish, and non-short grays and humans. So literally a whole plethora of different ET types. Again, we have similar things that describe it as mini humans and even giant humans, elves and fairies and what have you. So people are seeing all kinds of different things. And I think what this indicates is that we've got more than one ET species visiting our planet. It isn't just the grays and the reptilians. Again, this can all be broken down into a pie chart, as well as a chart of sort of a tree with branches and roots to it. Some of the descriptions based and drawings based on what was seen and described. Again, a lot of this appears to be humanoid. That is, it has a head, a body, 2 arms, hands, feet, and legs. And the head may have large eyes, small eyes, maybe more than 1 eye. Their hands may have more than 5 fingers. Some of them seem to have 4 opposing fingers on either side of their hand. Some have large ears, some are hairy, some are sort of almost robotic. So again, that's what we would expect of ETs. We cannot expect them to be human-like or even necessarily humanoid. In the bottom graph here, we see things that are like energy type beings, and beings that perhaps not only organic, but maybe even robotic in their shape and design. Some are reptilian, some are green, some look like a wombat or a bat of some kind with very large ears. The typical gray, which we've had a lot of people describe. That's, you know, the gray being is definitely a real being, but as to is it the being that most people see? No, they're only seeing this in certain countries. Not everybody in other countries see this. In Russia, they've described beings 10 feet tall and wearing helmets and coming out during the daytime and doing different things. And so the thing is, wherever you go, you can probably get a description of one form or being or another. And I believe it was Sergeant Cliff Clifford that who had described 54 different species. I've heard that there's 125, so we don't know. In this section, we're looking at drawings and digital images of ET, Extraterrestrial Intelligence. These are beings that have been seen by a lot of people. The typical, what we call gray, the somewhat mantis or insect-like. There are some here that are wearing spacesuits, some that are green and almost amphibious looking, tall beings that resemble grays, the gray or neophyte type of ET, and the Virginia ET that was seen in Brazil, that was brown, had red eyes, and 3 bumps on its head. These are, again, pictures and descriptions of ETs. This was taken, a drawing of an ET that appeared in Finland, and it looked like it was wearing a clown-type hat, carrying a box that descended from a spacecraft where skiers were out in the country one time, cross-country skiing. There are amphibian beings that look dolphin-like. This is rather interesting here. These are cynocephaly. cynocephaly, I didn't include this in part of my original slide in the beginning of when I talked about the U-Bayed lizard people, but cynocephaly are dog face or wolf face beings. They were actual beings in Europe and the Middle East that people used to trade with. And the interesting thing is that these were fierce warrior-like creatures, but there were some that were very cultured and domestic in their livelihood. They would actually trade. And even St. Christopher was known to have been one of these cynocephaly, where he had facial hair and resembled a dog, had a dog head and body. When he took on Christianity, he became a human in physical form. So, you know, is this a real event? I don't know, but it's recorded in Christian theology. Here we have other different beings, some that have this sort of Middle Eastern, Arabic, or Jewish type nose, but with wrinkles on its head. It's shown in pictures and drawings. There are some beings that have two sets of arms and hands that are in its upper torso, and what looks like to be almost tentacle type legs, or legs coming off it. In other words, what, 4 legs coming off the body. We have the reptilian type of beings. We have beings that probably don't fit any kind of particular description other than they are unusual. There are beings that look like human body parts, but on a massive scale. This one was described as like a large brain-like mass with a reddish eye or reddish center in its forehead. This was seen in the States. We have beings that are 12 or 15 feet in height. The Pascagoula ET that was seen, that was sort of robotic in shape. And then we have beings that seem to depict both organic and inorganic construction or appearance, where they have what looks like a metal pedestal and some kind of helmet with with an antenna on the top of it. This was seen in Brazil. These are digital impressions of ETs. Not all of these are actual ETs. I think this is some of this is free artist interpretation and of what they think some ETs may look like. However, we've got enough reports to indicate that some ETs are reptilian in nature. Some are considered the gray, or what I like to prefer to call as sort of Casper the Ghost-like in appearance. Some are this Virginia, Brazil ET with brown skin, brown oily skin, red eyes and bumps on its head. Others are this type of being that is sort of a childlike being. So there's a wide variety. Some are very human. This one here is considered to be a being found on the moon and is known as the Mona Lisa, or Luna Mona Lisa, and was actually retrieved from an alien spacecraft and brought on board one of the Apollo missions, the secret Apollo mission. And these beings here are the ones that Travis Walton described: mantis, amphibian, or dolphin-like. Again, these are more sort of interpretations of what an artist thinks some ETs may look like. This one here, this octopoid being, I've actually remote viewed this type of being, and I'm convinced that it is an actual being. I've had other remote views, and we'll get into that as well. But here you see the diversity, the whole thing behind this. And this really, in some ways, confirms what the Baha'i faith has been saying, and what Baha'u'llah has been saying, is that there is a diversity of life out there. And it doesn't necessarily look like humans, and it will probably think and behave a lot differently than humans. So part of our initial contact with ET beings is to find out the similarities we have. We will obviously see physical differences, but that isn't what we need to dwell on. We need to find out, what do we share in common? Do they even recognize a supreme being or something else? Or do they not recognize anything but themselves? And here we have the typical grays and the reptilians. Canadian scientists in paleontology suggested that if one of the dinosaurs that was fairly intelligent evolved over the 63 million years that it had a chance to live on this earth, that it would have evolved into something more humanoid in shape, but still maintained its reptilian features. And geez, it looks a lot like some of these other beings that we're looking at. So is that a possibility? It seems odd that a whole group of animals or reptilians passed away from a meteorite or something in the past. Surely some of them must have survived or evolved. And now these are some of real photos of ETs. And you may have seen some of these. The typical grays, and again, I don't like using that term grays and reptilians, because it is a racist statement by humans who are fairly ignorant about what these beings really are. They may not even refer to themselves as, yeah, I'm a gray, and yeah, I'm a reptilian. Even though we can draw similarities to our own life forms on this planet, that doesn't mean that that's what they are. This being here is probably from a video that was of a being that was captured and held prisoner by some people in Spain or in Brazil. These are beings that were found near a craft that died. They were quite small. This is a person's hand holding this being. This is the Luna Mona Lisa. This is a being that hatched from an egg, and it has some sort of amphibious look or appearance to it. And apparently the person who photographed this, it was more or less of a test to see how he would react to a being that got up and ran away after it hatched. This is from the Virginia ET encounter, where the number of girls saw this being crouched down beside a wall, and when they saw its red eyes, they said, "Ah, diablo, and they ran home to their parents to tell that they had seen the devil, and they didn't understand. I sometimes think that humanity is in many stages of involvement, and some of these people hold on to such traditional religious beliefs that it acts as a block to their ability to move forward into what we would call the current 21st century age. And we in the West are very fortunate enough that we have a great education system. And I think the rest of the world is obviously moving forward in the same direction, but there's still pockets of humanity that obviously are still dealing with this, I don't know, retrograde educational aspect in their life. Here we have beings that seem to be of light or energy. This is something I would expect to see more often because it does not fall into the definition of what we would consider to be a life form, but it is, because it represents energy. A little being that was found during or after the Second World War. There are numerous accounts to all of this. I'm not going to go into all of it. Some of you are familiar with the Atacama being that Dr. Greer worked on. This being was about 6 inches high. He believed that being that this was a 6 or 8 year old child, a childlike being, whether it was human or alien is hard to determine, but it was definitely unusual. But what is of interest is this is a video, or still from a video, of a being that ran out from the corner of a room across the floor and towards what appears to be, being that this is light reflecting off a window or an open door, was running to that direction. And the mother was filming the child on the floor when all of a sudden this being ran across. What is interesting is that this child turned around and looked. Now, this is the innocence of a child who was obviously had seen something in the corner of its eye and went to investigate. They never did find out what this was, but this being was obviously running. So this is a being that's probably about 1 foot high, which would fall in line with this type of thinking that Dr. Greer had, that this child, his parents may have been 1 foot high. Here are other photos taken from CSETI groups from the States. This being here is about 10 or 12 feet high, and it's leaning over the group where there are chairs. This is another one where there's a person felt the need to get up and take a photograph of the group or the chairs and caught this ET being that's obviously wearing a helmet. And I've tried to examine this, and there are some facial features on this, but it's very hard to discern. This one was taken by somebody from Grant Cameron's group, and there are beings surrounding that group. This is another one. This is from a video where this creature has 4 legs and a long tail, but has a sort of a humanoid head on it, and it's walking across traffic, and the cars are honking at it. And then you see it again walking through a park, and then again down the road. So if this is CGI, it's very, very good, but I don't think it is. The bottom ones seem to show what are called night stalkers. They are beings that appear to have just 2 legs and a body and a head, and they're striding across a field or an area that is open, and this was photographed. This one here, this isn't the same being, but there's a being where there's 2 mounted patrolmen going through a park, and this being suddenly runs across between the 2 mounted men as they pass each other. Okay, these are some of my remote views of extraterrestrial intelligence. What I've seen is, this actually happened to me when I was a 5-year-old child. I had ET beings come into my bedroom. I had been out a couple of days earlier, and I had been with my mother when we were walking on a Canadian military base or an Air Force base, and we saw a flying saucer come over. I didn't know that it was a flying saucer. I was only 5 years old, and I asked my mother, what was that? And she said, I don't know, I think it's a plane. And then it took off. A few days later, these beings at night came through my bedroom wall. They did it not once, but 3 times, and it scared the dickens out of me. And my mother had to come in a couple of times to settle me down. And the last memory I had was that these beings came in a 3rd time. I was walking around the bottom of my bed, and I pulled the covers up over my head and hid, thinking that if I can't see them and they can't see me, they're not there. This is what they look like. Your description may say this is grays. They look like Casper the Ghost to me, because they appeared ghost-like. They were luminous. They weren't wearing yellow suits, but they were wearing something similar to what this being is wearing. Another remote view I had was when I was in Crestone, Colorado, back in 1996, and I had a a download dump of ET beings, and what I saw was this being that was upside down, and then I realized as it moved that it was in a sauce, and it righted itself. It was almost playing with me in a humorous manner. This is another being that I refer to as the Giraffe Man, and the only reason for that is because when I first saw it, its head was down on its chest, and suddenly it raised its head up on a very long neck. This is a very tall being with long arms and limbs and hands, and had these dark eyes, and very curiously had a little mustache, very comical. Another one was this type of giant eye that was on what appeared to be like elephant feet. Somebody else had the same remote view of this, so this was a confirmation that we were getting the same download of information. This person or being here was human, and I only got a quick glimpse of this person before she disappeared. It was like I wasn't supposed to see her. The other beings, this one, these two could be the same, but I felt they were different, but they each had long eye stalk with eyes on top of it, similar to an insect's eye. But in this one case, this one had individual stalkettes with individual eyes on them. This was the ET that I saw that looked like an octopus. It had very intense eyes, and it stared at me very intensely. And as I looked at it, I thought it wants to engage me in a staring contest. So I stared back at it, and we stared for perhaps a minute or two. And then I got the sensation that it was smiling at me and sort of said, "You passed the test." And then it kind of faded away. This is all from remote viewing, except for the first one with this short little ghost-like, or Casper the ghost-like ETs. This other one here is of a cynocephaly. I was asking if I could get a ride on board their craft. I had a dream. It was a lucid dream. They said, "We're here to give you your ride." So I went aboard the craft, and at that point I woke up. So I don't know what the dream was about. And finally, this other one here is of what we would call the reptilian. And he is, Dr. Gray said, ask for an ET to be your guide. He said, here's one, or here's the one that appeared to me, and it looked like this, and it had all these spots on it, and it looked like a gecko lizard. And I asked it if it had a name, and the name he gave me was HGN. And it made no sense to me because I didn't understand what that name meant, other than it was letters. And then about a month later, as I thought about it more, I realized it was reptilian, and that the letters were given to my basic simple human understanding, which was to be pronounced in a consonant type fashion, but gutturally. Hugna. Hugna is the name of that individual. So, and I showed this picture to Dr. Gray, and he says, "Yes, I've seen that particular ET." And so it was another confirmation. Okay, these are photos and videos of orb entity in my backyard. What my camera caught is a security camera, and it caught these this animal, which it labeled as an animal. And I thought, oh, I got to blow that up and see what kind of animal it was. And as I blew it up, I realized that's not an animal, it's something else. And so I played the video back a number of times to see what this was. And what happened was it came out of the wall, which you can see here, and then it started to move across the backyard towards the gate. It moved a little bit, and then it started to come back. And at this point, this is the same point in which the camera caught it, and it was moving towards the corner of where the camera was positioned. Now, I actually have the video, so I'll run this. I'll play this video a couple of times. It's quite short, so pay attention. You just saw something fly off there. Watch what happens right around here. You're going to see something come out in a minute. Here, there it is. Now, there's other things that come across right there, right through there. There's something else there, and something else just came back from there. What's interesting is all these objects are moving into one direction, which is in the bottom right-hand corner. Very unusual. I've actually looked at my my camera to see if there was any cobwebs or insects around it. Nothing. I've also found that there was a white dot that moved around the surface of this wall. And when I went outside to look at it, I couldn't see the dot. But my camera on my cell phone could see where the dot was. And I have another picture, which I'm not showing you, but I'm pointing up to where this dot is. Even though I cannot see it visually with my own eyes, the camera could pick up on it. Okay, I was gonna play that again one more time. Oops, sorry. So just watch what happens as this white amorphous orb comes out of the wall. This indicates to me, in my mind at least, that this is interdimensional because it's able to pass through solids. And that's part of the aspect of interdimensionality. It's how ETs put on their spacesuits, it's how their craft flies, it's how they communicate. It's interdimensional technology, and they can move through solids. Okay, so we're at the end. Now I'll take some questions. The end. There we go. So I hope I did that in some reasonable record time. Cosmic Cousin Productions. Okay, I'm open for questions.